Good afternoon and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining Withum today. We have a great presentation in store for you all. Before we begin, I just have a few housekeeping items to cover. First, you will all be off camera and on mute throughout the presentation. The session will also be recorded for future reference, and a link to it will be provided to all attendees today. And feel free to share any additional thoughts or input after the webinar has wrapped up, as your feedback is greatly appreciated. And with that, I am going to turn it over to today's moderator, Stephen Monticelli, partner and team leader of Withum's Cannabis Sector Services team.
Alexis, thank you very much. And everyone, welcome. And it's my pleasure to have Krista Nash with us today from the New Jersey Cannabis Regulatory Commission. Krista comes to the commission from Volunteers of America Delaware Valley, where she serves as the director of the Promise program. In this capacity, she worked to meet the unique needs of individuals exiting the criminal justice system with co-occurring disorders. She has really focused her career on people re-entering society from a clinical social worker perspective. And I can see some family members when Krista was younger thinking about, well, Krista, what would you like to do when you grow up? I suspect that she had no idea that she would become a commissioner of a cannabis regulatory commission in an adult use market in New Jersey. So that being said, I'm going to turn this over to Krista. Welcome and thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Stephen, for that kind introduction. Today marks 123 days since adult use cannabis sales began on April 21st in the Great Garden State. Slide. At the CRC, we took a strong statutory framework and we listened to stakeholders and built upon that. We removed barriers by including a conditional licensure process, which I will touch on later. We established the Office of Diversity and Inclusion to ensure that we are doing everything we can in our control to meet the equity initiatives set forth in the legislation, including the creation of a legacy work group. We established strong consumer and public health protections like advertising and labeling requirements. And we implemented an innovative tax and fee structure called Groundbreaking and the first of its kind. And I encourage you to read the article shared in the link. Next slide. Sales of adult use cannabis in New Jersey generated nearly $80 million from April 21st to June 30th. That is about $8 million per week. Let me repeat that, $80 million, folks. That's a lot of good vibes. And tax revenue for this period totaled $4.6 million. I do want to mention that some of the tax revenue is designated for the Underage Deterrence Fund and for social equity excise fees. And you can find out about where those monies go on our website. What I find striking is that this revenue was generated by only 18 dispensaries, 5 in the South, 7 in Central, and 6 in North Jersey. So who is actually operational? Currently, 8 multi-state operators who also serve the medicinal market are the only cannabis businesses licensed to sell adult use cannabis at this time. There were questions about why the CRC allowed the operators to have first advantage in the market when the conversation turned to social equity. The commission is tasked, among other things, with adopting rules that are set forth in statute in the CREAM Act, which grandfathered in the existing alternative treatment centers, known as ATCs, to allow them to expand operations into this nascent cannabis market. The ATCs were the only companies that had the legal right to apply for expansion. But the CRC's focus was to ensure that the expansions did not cannibalize the medicinal market in favor of the lucrative adult use market. Next slide. At the April 11th, 2022 public meeting, the the CRC considered the certifications of 7 ATCs that applied for expansion. A full application was not required. However, these ATCs were required to certify that certain conditions would be met. Next slide. Those conditions included municipal approval, proof of sufficient supply to continue to meet patient need after expansion, plans to ensure convenient parking, special hours, and dedicated registers for patients, and plans to address social equity and safety, and have a labor peace agreement with a bona fide labor organization. To be clear, businesses do not have to look far to find a union that represents cannabis workers, both in New Jersey and throughout the nation. During that public meeting, ATC representatives presented their plans to meet these conditions and were ultimately granted approval. The Commission remains committed to ensuring that compliance with the conditions that allow these ATCs to expand are upheld. But as with any new process, there are bound to be problems, and some ATCs quickly fell out of compliance with certain conditions and were subsequently fined approximately $386,000. Our priorities remain patient access and social equity. There have been complaints that some discounts on medicinal cannabis have disappeared since adult use cannabis became available. And that is already when patients report that their medicine is unaffordable, and that is unacceptable. ATCs are not allowed to raise their prices on patients, and we are carefully monitoring that. We are also collecting demographic data as it relates to staffing and are working with the ATCs in order to establish corporate social responsibility and equity plans and helping them oversee those plan implementations. I'm also excited to report that soon there will be an equity scorecard so that these efforts are transparent to the public. Next slide. CRC staff has been rapidly reviewing applications in order of priority. Priority applications increase opportunities in the cannabis industry for people from designated target communities, for people with cannabis convictions, whether they're expunged or not, and for minorities, women, and disabled veterans. And the QR code on the slide provides priority review information from our website. Next slide. We are frequently asked why it is taking so long to get business licensed. And to answer that, I will provide a brief overview of the licensure process and the CRC's progress to date. The law and CRC's corresponding rules create two paths to licensure. One via conditional application, which is subject to income requirements, and which allows applicants to apply without site control and municipal approval. And one for annual licensure, which per the law requires both site control and municipal approval at the time of application. So in both of these application processes, the CRC prioritizes review of social equity businesses and diversely owned businesses. Next slide. Conditional applications are received, sorted by priority in accordance with the notice of application acceptance, with social equity applications receiving first review. And then they are reviewed for completeness, they're scored, they're reviewed for qualification, regulatory compliance, and then they are considered by the Commission for approval. Next slide. For conditional conversion and annual applications, it's the same process as conditionals, but after scoring, they are fingerprinted and background checked pursuant to law. They're investigated for any issues that would disqualify them for licensure. And disqualifying convictions are limited in personal use to issues directly related to the authorities a license grants them. So for example, if an applicant had a history of diverting cannabis across state lines, which is federally illegal, or selling to underage kids, that could disqualify them from consideration. But past marijuana convictions, especially low-level ones, do not. Financial sources are vetted for compliance and are then considered by the commission if approved. And then following build out of facility and successful final inspection, they will be issued a license. Next slide. To date, the CRC has received approximately 1,200 applications. That's a lot. This shows the percentages of total applications we received in each of these categories. And the point here is that over 75% of the 1,200 applications received were in these priority categories, which are priority category 1 and 2. So the application process is straightforward, but we are finding in their eagerness, many applicants are submitting incomplete applications. And unfortunately, we have sent out more cure letters than approvals. So cure letters are issued when an application is missing information or if it requires a more complete response. The good news is that once a deficiency is cured, the applicant goes right back into the priority category, and there's very little delay. Next slide. All applications, new apps, cured apps, conditional conversion applications are sorted by that priority system outlined in the notice of application acceptance. They're ordered by priority designation and then by time that they're submitted, they're time stamped. And I am pleased to report that as of last week, the Office of Licensing began assigning out the annual applications for review. So while we continue to receive new applications every day, remember, applications are received on a rolling basis. This means that as of 2 weeks ago, all conditional applications had at least begun the review process, and almost all have been completely reviewed once. We are well within our reach of getting through the entire slate of over 1,200 applications, from priority review to completed investigation in the next several months. And that is really exciting. And that's a lot of applications, and kudos to our staff. So next slide. I just wanted to talk about some insights and predictions for this cannabis industry here in the Garden State. Cannabis markets have grown at different paces in different places. Many states that have opened for adult use sales had a considerable number of medicinal dispensaries already operational. New Jersey had 12. So as you can see, the number of dispensaries considerably increases the revenue. For instance, Michigan saw $188 million in adult use sales in July, and that total was about 15 million greater than the previous monthly record set in April. Illinois, 135 million in July, the largest monthly sales total so far in 2022. And as of mid-May, Massachusetts surpassed $3 billion in adult use sales since the market launched in 2018. Accurate forecasts about New Jersey's market will only be possible with more time and more data. But as you can see, more dispensary openings will have a positive impact on earnings, tax revenue, and price reduction. And I will also add that it will definitely add more jobs to this industry or to the state. This year, the CRC removed the 1-year operational limit on the 44 medicinal cannabis businesses from the 2019 RFA. So what that means is we will see those additional retail spaces coming online in the future, which again will increase tax revenue. The most mature market in the country is less than 10 years old, and we are all learning lessons about patient access, what works to control prices, and what makes a market equitable. New Jersey is looking promising right now, and we continue to measure, learn, and adjust. Next slide. So I want to talk about the next phase of the cannabis industry. Looking to the future, on August 1st, the CRC proposed new permanent rules, and New Jersey residents are being invited to give their feedback on the proposed rules up to September 30th. The link can be found on the Commission's website, and I encourage everyone to give their feedback. We listen to stakeholders. We want to hear what you have to say, so please, 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 please comment. Some of the highlights of the proposed updated rules to note are, regardless, and this is important, regardless of whether conditional or standard application, a social equity, diversely owned, and impact zone applicant will always have priority review over other license applicants. So the difference here is that annual license applicants in these categories are prioritized below conditional applications. So presumably, an annual applicant already has municipal approval, they have site control, and they may be inspection ready, but they would have to wait until the CRC has reviewed all of the conditional applications before their application was reviewed. So it just makes good business sense to review annuals along with conditionals in these categories to get them operational quickly. The rules add guidance for 3 license types: wholesalers, distributors, and delivery services. They clarify that impact zones and microbusiness applicants are prevented from changing their location to a disqualifying location during the conditional license conversion process. So if they're applying as a minority-owned business or women-owned business, an impact zone business, they need to remain in that impact zone in order to qualify and get the priority review. The rules establish guardrails to combat exploitive business contracts and prevent deceptive license ownership transfers. For example, we are reviewing financial source agreements to ensure that a loan from a financial source to the license applicant or license holder is commercially reasonable and that interest rates do not exceed 20%, and that management service contractors do not have an ownership interest in the cannabis business they are serving. Legal cannabis is broken down into 2 simple categories: ingestibles and inhalable cannabis products. In many states, cookies and brownies are considered edibles, but that is not the case here in New Jersey. CRC is only 16 months old. And as you heard, we have accomplished a lot in the 16 months since we formed. And we were tasked with setting up this program for a $1 billion industry. We beat the timeline for rolling out initial regulations. But when it comes to ingestibles, we wanted to create parity between the adult use and the medical market so that the same products are available in both. But we also hear you. We hear the public's call for expanding our ingestible products, and it is something we will take up in the future. The rules provide a robust set of licensing and testing standards, consumer protections, monitoring enforcement provisions for the state's cannabis industry. And the industry is going to continue to grow and expand. And we need to make sure that we remain compliant with safety and equity. So let's talk about the importance of safety in terms of compliance. Next slide. The cannabis industry is highly regulated, and compliance is key to success. To ensure the rules are being properly followed, the Commission is authorized to inspect cannabis businesses and testing laboratories, issue notice of violations for regulatory infractions, issue fines and suspend or revoke licenses when deemed appropriate. There are 5 classifications of license violations carrying monetary penalties set forth in this slide. Some of these violations include, but are not limited to, Category 1, repeatedly violating the requirements of the rules, which can lead to license revocation. Category 2, licensee or permittee poses an immediate and serious risk of harm or actual harm to the health, safety, or welfare of consumers, personnel, or the general public. Category 3, submission of fraudulent, false, or misleading information by applicant. Category 4, which is the failure of an owner, principal, management, service contractors, and others to register with the Commission. Category 5 are violations of municipal ordinances. On the next slide is the violations matrix. Next slide. So, what are ways to support cannabis businesses? Next slide. We are working to build a framework for a successful cannabis market in New Jersey, but the market faces some challenges, and we can't do it alone. We are working with stakeholders, other state agencies, and we've established internal working groups to try and find ways to help new businesses address key barriers like access to capital for entrepreneurs. While there is much that needs to be done here, on June 30th, Governor Murphy signed Bill S-2945, which permits the New Jersey EDA to extend financial incentives to small cannabis businesses located in impact zones. There is a list on our website, and which employ the equivalent of fewer than 250 full-time employees. That is very helpful, although it is critical that we continue to explore incentives for cannabis businesses outside of these impact zones. Municipalities. We are in constant conversations with municipalities, as well as the League of Municipalities, the Urban Mayors Association, and the Association of Mayors, to lower as many obstacles to entry as possible for applicants, particularly small businesses. We hope that municipal leaders are convinced that a socially equitable marketplace is good for all of New Jersey, and that they have a role to play here in making it so by keeping municipal fees low and allowing businesses in. Ewing is one example of a town that seems to be trying to serve the mission of equity. They prioritize social equity businesses, and there is no limit on cultivation and manufacturing facilities. They also formed a committee comprised of the mayor, a business owner, a professional, a member from town council, and their township planner to interview hopeful cannabis businesses. Plainfield also set an example by prioritizing applicants that were residents of the city. So there's some great ideas. They're thinking outside the box, and they're helping their community members. Great stuff. Real estate shortages. We read it all the time. We hear it all the time. Applicants are looking for a space. But this has been exacerbated by municipal restrictions. There are approximately 193 municipalities that have opted in, but they have limited slots for different types of licenses. We are aware that some applicants are having trouble caused by limited supply and inflated pricing, compounded with a few municipalities where they can operate. So we hope that real estate holders see cannabis as an opportunity to invest in the potential of this industry and make good faith accommodations for new businesses, especially those in priority categories. The federal status, until there is a change in the federal status of cannabis, There will be ongoing challenges for entrepreneurs and those who want to work in the industry. At the CRC, we don't have complete control over these things, but that doesn't mean we are ignoring them, and we know they are a challenge to businesses. This is an evolutionary process, and I think we are off to a great start. Thank you.
Krista, thank you very much. That was very insightful. I believe we have some advanced questions that were submitted that perhaps we can just go through some Q&A. The first one is, some municipalities such as Maplewood and Newark have blocked out conditional applicants to getting local approval. Please explain what measures the CRC is taking to get said municipalities to comply with CRC regulations that give conditional applicants preference. Should affected conditional licensees contact the CRC for redress?
So great question, and I'm glad to be able to answer it in this forum. So any applicant that believes a municipality is not acting ethically can take action against them, and that does not involve the CRC. They should notify their local law enforcement, and that can be handled in that regard, or they could take legal action, but that is not under the CRC's purview.
Excellent, excellent. Second question is there an estimated time frame for how long it will take the commission to work through all of the applications that were submitted on December 15th of 2021?
So, as I mentioned, we have been reviewing over 1,200 applications, and we are working as expeditiously as possible within our prioritization process that I mentioned to review all of these applications. Every month for the past 3 months, we have reviewed and awarded approximately 80 conditional applications, and we're working with licensees to get them through the annual conversion application process to become operational as quickly as we can. And I think that soon, we hope that our response time for all conditional applications will be less than 90 days.
Oh, that's fantastic. Mm-hmm. The third question, how is the CRC holding up with all of the pressure associated with the process of enforcement and licensing? And do you have the resources that you need?
We're doing great. We have accomplished a lot, and I've only mentioned a sliver from when we began in April of 2021. So we have the resources, we have the manpower, we're plowing through these 1,200 applications, and we're excited to see businesses become operational.
Excellent. Next question is, how long does the CRC expect to take it to complete a review for a diverse micro conversion license?
So diverse micro licenses are prioritized in the priority review, but it depends on zoning. They have to have zoning approval, municipal approval. The background checks have to go through the process, which can sometimes take a bit of time. So conversions definitely take a lot longer than the conditional processes, which are much more abbreviated, where you don't need site control, you don't need a municipal approval. So it just depends on those factors.
Excellent, excellent, thank you. Next question, is the CRC aware of any of the issues that have been ongoing in some municipalities, such as Hoboken? And has the CRC tried to reach out specifically to those towns and offer education, guidance, or mediation?
So I'll say that, as I mentioned earlier, that we are doing outreach. We're aware of some of the barriers that applicants are facing in terms of trying to find a site in the limited number of municipalities that have opted in, as well as the limited license categories available in those towns. But we are doing outreach. We continue to work with towns and municipalities and these organizations such as the League, the Urban Mayors, and the Conference of Mayors, with the intent of providing guidance and educating. So, we hear you, and we are working hard to try and get more municipalities online.
Excellent. Next question is, in order to temporarily alleviate New Jersey's supply drought, would New Jersey ever consider entering into an interstate agreement for the purchase of cannabis with those states that have approved such interstate sales, such as California and Oregon?
So first of all, there is no shortage of product. We are fully supplied, and currently federal laws prohibit interstate transit. So there's not much that can be done here yet.
Yeah, that's a good observation. Good point. The last question is, please touch on the problems seen across all applicants in finding real estate, strict town guidelines, and how to ease the minds of towns that have issues allowing cannabis. Thank you.
So we hope that real estate brokers and others think of this emerging cannabis industry as an opportunity to invest in the market. A conditional license is a seal of approval, and as the market matures, that we hope that people see these businesses as an investment. And we've seen the price gouging and the inflated rents, so they can help in that regard. There's a lot that can be done.
Excellent.
I want to mention one more thing. One thing is my first answer when I said to call the police, I meant that was for the gray market, but that's irrelevant. They can take legal action if they feel that a conditional license feel a municipality is not being fair. They're not to call the police. But I did want to mention that if you are unaware, the commission has recently conducted 6 informational sessions on the metric seed to sale tracking. So I'm not sure if we have recordings of that, but that is actually for applicants and those in the plant touching business. And the information on that can be found on our website. So be sure and check it out because it can be a great help to you.
Krista, thank you. This has been very insightful. I know that we were limited in terms of the number of questions that can be addressed, but if anyone has any additional questions, if they could send an email to Alexis, we'll be sure that Commissioner Nash and her team get the questions and they can respond to you directly. And on behalf of Withum, I'd like to thank you very much for attending today's session. Enjoy the day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.